Buongiorno, siamo con padre Robert Sirico, presidente dell'Acton Institute del Michigan. Oggi l'Acton Institute è presente a Roma con una conferenza a proposito dello sviluppo economico in Asia. Ne approfittiamo per intervistare padre Robert Sirico sull'economia e sui principi che il suo istituto promuove negli Stati Uniti e nel mondo. We are living from an economic and social crisis that looks like a crisis of man and human. What values must the work discover again today?
People very often think that the economy is completely separate from the human person. I think this is because there are so many mathematical conceptions of what the economy is, but really, when you consider what the economy is, it's simply human action in the economic sphere. So it's not so easy to separate human values, human well-being from the economy as such. And likewise, the economy is formed by the values that people hold subjectively. What you buy, what you sell, what you invest in, what you don't invest in, all is the result of the values that human beings hold. So when you have a crisis in the economy, it is a crisis in humanity, either because humanity itself has lost focus of its own orientation, of its own reason for existence, or because the economy has somehow been held captive to private interests of small groups of people and politicians, rather than of the general common well-being of people.
In Europe and in the West, the economy is mainly estimated like a business, so it comes a little planning and a little development. What are the true values that belong to the entrepreneur?
The way I look at it is that entrepreneurship is really a calling. It's true that a person responds, a person has to make a decision to respond to the calling, but the calling is a calling of creativity. It's a calling of responsibility. It's a calling that requires a full understanding that while economic truths are true, they are not the whole truth of who human beings are. So in any kind of business endeavor, it's imperative that the entrepreneur keep not just the goal as his or her focus, but also the process. In fact, it's the values that produce the goal. So if you understand that the people with whom you are working and who you are serving are human beings with a transcendent dignity, then you're going to produce things that are going to reflect that kind of value. So I think it's important that business people not just think of how much money can I make, but how can I serve people, because that's the way to ensure that you can be economically successful.
In Italy, there is a dramatic situation of the young people. There is a war in decline in the desire, turning away the youth from the real values of the work. So youth unemployment has reached abnormal levels. How can young people be helped?
This is a very, very critical thing, and it's a very complex thing from a moral and an economic perspective. But if I could just touch on a few things, I think that there has been a great intervention in Italian society on the part of the state, and it may be a well-intended intervention, but nonetheless what it has created is a kind of separation of generations. What you might call an intergenerational warfare, so that young people are having to produce more and more to subsidize their elders. At the same time, there's been a breakdown of the family unit. So it seems to me, when I come to Italy, I come from an Italian-American family where my grandparents had 13 children. In Italy, if you find a family with 2 or 3 children, that's a large family. Something has happened to the Italian psyche, and I think a lot of it has to do with the intervention into the market by the state and the lack of hope that young people have for their future. So they don't have this sense of investment in their own lives and in their own future. I think we need to go back and reduce the role of the political sector and increase the private and communal sectors so as to respect the principle of subsidiarity once again.
In the West, there is much economic difference between the managers and the workers. On the income distribution, which can be the economic alternatives of Marxist thinking?
Marxist thinking basically presupposes that the economy is like a pie that needs to be divided up. So if somebody has a greater piece of the pie, it means that somebody else has to have a lesser piece of the pie. But that's just the Marxist paradigm. It's not true. It's an illusion. In fact, a free economy is dynamic, so that a person who is more productive in a free economy has a greater share of that productivity, while another person who may be less productive has a lesser point. So the alternative to the Marxist paradigm is a paradigm of free cooperative human beings using their initiative to be creative, and to be creative in a whole host of ways, rather than the static and highly politicized notion of socialist ideology.
What can you say about the relationship between economic development and the religious practice?
There is a myth that the more prosperous people become, the less religious they are, the less they practice their faith. But in Asia, we're at a conference dealing with Asia, what we found is that that is not the case at all, that as the poor increase in their economic level of income, they maintain the practice of the faith. And in China, there's a veritable religious revival going on of Christians who people who are coming to Christianity as they are becoming more economically successful. So the question is whether or not Christianity has a role to play also in economic success and prosperity.